Now, it's time for today's perspective, and it was right back in 1848, so nearly 180 years ago, that France abolished slavery. And yet, it is just a few days ago now that France finally repealed the so-called Code Noir, or Black Code, the law that effectively regulated slavery, made people like property, notably in the French colonies, enabling people to be worked, beaten, sold, raped, and even killed. The realisation that the law was never repealed until last week, reopening as well now a new debate about reparations from France in a country that critics say has still to fully come to terms with its history of colonialism. Joining me now is a historian and professor at SOAS in London, Olivette Otele. Thanks very much for joining us on the programme today. I mean, nowadays it does seem incredible, doesn't it, that this law even existed in the first place, signed back in 1685 by Louis XIV. What did it allow at the time for France and French people to be able to do?
Well, thank you for having me, first of all. What it really did is an attempt to regulate the lives of people living in the colonies, from the colonists and slaveholders to enslaved people. And it was also an attempt to try and impose a legal status upon enslaved people, because at the time, Versailles and the government in France was afraid that the proximity to enslaved people will lead to miscegenation, which is, mixity, but also will prevent slaveholders from applying and using them as tools, reproductive tools, as currency, and as labor. So it was really to try and regulate everything in the colonies.
And we mustn't forget, of course, that France ran the world's third largest slave trade, didn't it?
Yes, it did. And it was a competition and an important moment for France, because it was trying to get on top of that trade and try and encroach on Portuguese, the Dutch and the British colonies. So it was really a race at the time, and try and codify those lives also meant that protecting France's colonial interest and trading interest as well. But also looking at religion and trying and imposing a kind of moral compass on a society that was inherently violent and that was using the bodies of people of African descent. So many contradictions within the Black Code.
And equally incredible that until last week, this was still on the statute books here in France. It was just never repealed when France abolished slavery. I mean, how on earth do you think that managed to come about?
It's interesting because many people actually have been fighting to get that code abolished, but it wasn't a priority for successive French governments, because like many European countries, France wanted to focus on the abolition and therefore celebrate the abolition of slavery and the slave trade and then slavery. Just like Britain with the bicentenary, France focused on the 1848 abolition and therefore was really reluctant to look into that, because the successive governments knew that as soon as you start talking about these, it meant that you have to look at the violence that was embedded within the institution of slavery, and therefore you have to start looking at the legacies of the past, from racism to racial social inequalities based based on race, another term that France didn't want to talk about. So many things, a can of worms had been opened, and but I welcome that, because I welcome the discussion, because now we can start talking about reparations, and in particular the fact that we also celebrated the 25th anniversary of the Taubira law. We mustn't forget that, because these things are linked. The Taubira law, and then the repealing of the Code Noir, and prior to that, the UN resolution about considering slavery as the gravest crime against humanity, really is putting those debates in the public domain, and for people to reflect on the legacies of those past.
Yeah, it's crucial, isn't it? Because it was, of course, a unanimous decision in the French Parliament last week. But I mean, as you say, is that enough? I mean, is that the end of it? Has France done its bit now and it can wash its hands and say everything's okay?
No, it's not enough. As last week, I was at the Élysée Palace when President Macron was saying that actually we need to talk about the reparations, and he did talk about it, and it was a historic moment because for the very first time, the high-ranking civil servants, the President of the Republic, was actually talking about reparations. He explained why France abstained during the UN resolution vote. He also explained that reparation, well, first of all, he explained that reparation should not have an end date because it was violent and it's something that we still feel today. However, what was expected by many was an apologies and a commitment to financial reparation, which he didn't do. So the debate is open to work on that as well. But also, it's not just about looking at the past and the legacies of the past in terms of financial terms, but thinking about the inequalities that exist in French territories, Martinique, Guadeloupe, Réunion, and so on and so forth, and how the past actually has shaped those societies there, and how racial hierarchy still exists today, as well as unemployment. I mean, one is more likely to have a position if a young person is of European descent rather than an African descent. And, these are things we need to really talk about.
Yeah, let's talk about it a bit more then. I mean, France didn't relinquish its slave colonies. The four oldest of them, the Guadeloupe, Martinique, French Guiana and Réunion, they were made French overseas departments back in 1946. It means they're governed from here in Paris. 1.9 million people live there. But as you say, they're still amongst the poorest areas of France, aren't they? I mean, enough being done there, or I assume you will say no, not at all.
No, absolutely not. And that is one of the most shameful part of the part of our history. I mean, I think that people in Guadeloupe and Martinique have been pushing for reform, for more independence, and for a certain number of things. They don't necessarily, most of them want to be out or be independent, although there is a strong independent movement. It really is about acknowledging that the past is still shaping their lives on a daily basis. Racism is it is, of course, a social construct, but a reality for these populations. The fact that access to health, access to education is a right for all French citizens, and they are French citizens. However, opportunities and social mobility is really difficult there, much more so than it is in mainland France, and that is often based on not necessarily skills, but the color of their skin. And yes, things need to change.
Good to talk to you on the programme today. Thank you very much for being with us. Olivette Otele joining us there from SOAS in London. Thanks very much once again.